The golden era of Dreamworks is probably the most insane topic to get on right now. It was a time when the studio balanced terrifying power with deep personal stories, creating antagonists that felt just as important as the heroes. But even with the occasional spark of greatness in recent years, especially with Jack Horner and company, this is an era we will never actually get back. It's never easy to strike gold with your first output, and it was the same for Dreamworks, a studio born out of a big, messy breakup. Jeffrey Katzenberg had just left Disney after a huge disagreement, and he was feeling very competitive. So he teamed up in 1994 with two other giants, Steven Spielberg and David Geffen, to create Dreamworks SKG. Their philosophy was simple but bold. They wanted to prove that animation wasn't just for little kids by making movies that were edgy, funny, and sophisticated enough for adults to enjoy too. However, their very first full animated feature was Ants, a movie which resulted in a lot of controversy because Pixar was working on A Bug's Life at the exact same time, and people accused Dreamworks of stealing the idea. Even though Ants was a success and people liked its darker tone, the movie felt a bit like a rough draft, yet it had elements that people weren't exactly used to, such as jokes for adults, themes about identity and control, and of course, General Mandible. Mandible had everything you would want in a villain. He was calm, smart, and always thinking 10 steps ahead. He was Dreamworks' attempt at criticizing scary ideas like fascism. You see, because he believed in control, order, and shaping the colony into something stronger, he was okay with wiping out thousands of worker ants he thought were weak. He stood as the complete opposite of Z, the main character, who believed every single ant mattered. That contrast worked and gave the story something real to hold on to. So as far as starts go, this was a good one for a villain, except there was still an issue. You see, Mandible came across like a strong idea that never fully turned into a memorable personality like the kind that characterized the villains of the Golden Era. You could understand what he wanted, but was he actually memorable? Not exactly. And the way he just falls to his death so easily was too weak for a force like him.
I am the colony! Oh, look out!
Still, that first step mattered. Dreamworks showed they were willing to go darker, take risks, and use their villains to talk about real-world problems like class warfare. And then they surprised us by following it up with something completely different, The Prince of Egypt. This is where everything changed. The scale, emotion, and storytelling all felt bigger, and right at the center of it was Ramses. He is truly worthy of the Golden Era, even though he came in many years too early. Ramses was a multidimensional villain whom you first meet as a kind-hearted brother of Moses. Then you see him grow into power, and with that power comes pressure.
Ramses, please, you must listen.
I will not be the weak link.
He carries the weight of a kingdom, the fear of failure, and the need to prove himself. Every decision he makes is tied to that struggle, and that is one of the things that makes him special. You understand every step he takes, even when those steps lead to pain. His conflict with Moses is personal, and when he refuses to let go, you see exactly why. But the brilliant thing is that he was not created to induce sympathy because he was also given a choice to be good. However, his pride and sense of duty pulled him in different directions. After him, the studio kept moving, trying new tones, new styles, and new ways to poke fun at the world. So the road to El Dorado came in with a lighter, more playful energy, with the villain Sekal Khan bringing intensity and belief. He was a subversion of the wise high priest archetype. Instead of being a calm guide, he was a bloodthirsty fanatic who used religion to manipulate people and satisfy his own dark desires. He truly believed in what he was doing, and that faith gave him purpose. Unfortunately, he also felt like he belonged to the plot more than the heart of the story, and because of this, you remember the heroes and the jokes more than you do him. But then Chicken Run gave us Mrs. Tweety, the first ever female villain from Dreamworks. A dangerous and cold-hearted businesswoman, she was a direct criticism of heartless capitalism and industrialization. She wanted to turn laying chickens directly into pies so she could make money faster.
Mrs. Tweedy's homemade chicken pies.
Her presence created tension in every scene, but her character stayed locked in one mode as she was cruel from start to finish. That made her effective, but it also limited how far she could go as a character. And then came Shrek, which flipped fairy tales, made fun of old ideas, and introduced Lord Farquaad. He was a perfect subversion of the brave prince we see in Disney movies. Instead of being heroic, he was an insecure, cruel man who wanted to create a perfect kingdom by getting rid of anyone who looked different. His character was also a very specific, personal jab at Michael Eisner, the man who was running Disney at the time. Farquaad worked because he was funny and mean at the same time. You could laugh at him and still see the damage he caused. He pushed the story forward by forcing Shrek out of his swamp, but his depth stayed simple. His actions came from insecurity, and the film used that as a running joke. So far, these villains are great, but there was a bit of one-dimensionality about them, which is why we can't call these earliest Dreamworks productions the Golden Era. Ramses still remained an outlier, and even the fairy godmother would have ridden with him if it weren't for her poorly executed end. In any case, a villain like Eris in Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas is also very interesting. She is beautiful, fluid, and moves like smoke, which was a huge step up in animation design.
And you are?
Eris, the goddess of discord.
But the movie didn't quite reach the same heights as Shrek, so her brilliance is often overlooked. She showed that Dreamworks was getting better at making villains who felt powerful and untouchable while looking the part as well. Yet the truth about this era is that many of these villains were mean or greedy or bossy, but they didn't always have a lot of heart or deep reasons for why they were doing what they were doing. So this period was more like a build-up to what was coming. Dreamworks kept trying, adjusting, and figuring out what made a villain truly stick. They found pieces of the answer in different films: emotional weight in one, presence in another, social criticism in another. All those pieces started to come together later, and that is where things get interesting, because the next phase is where those lessons finally lock in. We've all complained about how franchises can drag characters down over time. You see it happen again and again, but here's the funny part: that same idea of building a world and coming back to it is exactly what pushed Dreamworks into its strongest run, especially with two very important franchises that changed everything. So the year is 2008, and Kung Fu Panda had just been released, giving us Tai Lung, who was the perfect start to this golden age. What separates him from those earlier bad guys is how personal his story feels. Though a scary snow leopard who wants to take over the valley, he is also a son who feels betrayed by his father. Tai Lung was raised by Shifu to believe he was the chosen one, the greatest warrior ever. So when he was later rejected, his whole world broke. He's a tragic figure because, just like Ramses, you can see why he's so angry. But to make it even better, Tai Lung was also made into a dark mirror of the hero Po. While the big fat panda is humble and kind, Tai Lung is consumed by his own ego and has a desperate need for a dad's approval.
Who filled my head with dreams? Who drove me to train until my bones cracked?
The next franchise that defined this golden era came 2 years later in 2010, with How to Train Your Dragon. This movie took a different path with the Red Death, who served as the main villain. She is a massive, terrifying force of nature, a wild beast following her instincts to survive, and that makes her scary in a different way. And she works because wild animals like Red Death do not need backstories. Unfortunately, even as golden as this era is, things get messy for a second. You see, the same year Tai Lung showed up, Dreamworks gave us Makunga in Madagascar 2, and the difference is night and day because Makunga was a disaster. He was just an arrogant lion who used sneaky tactics because he wasn't strong enough to win a real fight. His plans were simple, and his ending was embarrassing.
Handbag! Beauty!
Thankfully, Tai Lung was so impressive that most of us just ignored the silly lion and focused on the real greatness happening elsewhere. But Dreamworks didn't stay in that weak spot for long, because 2011 gave us Lord Shen, and this is where things peak. He is probably the greatest villain Dreamworks ever created. Well, to be real, he is the second greatest after the actual greatest. Anyway, Shen walks into the story already tied to Poe in the worst way possible. Dude was the architect of the genocide that almost wiped out all the pandas just to stop a prophecy from coming true. That alone provides an emotionally grounded conflict. But Shen also backs things up with bravado and a charisma for the ages.
Now we've got the pleasantries out of the way, please leave my house.
He's a broken soul who thinks his parents hated him, and he's too proud to stop his path of destruction. Shen's successor, General Kai, also came with a magnetic presence and a lot of power. However, the way he was treated by the characters in the movie turned him into a joke.
This chitty chat. In this chat.
If not for those comedic interjections, he could have probably competed with Shen for his spot as a top 2 Dreamworks villain of all time. In any case, the How to Train Your Dragon franchise gave us a sequel in 2014, where we meet Drago Bloodfist. Drago was a great way to close things out for the Golden Era because the guy was just too good. He had the presence, he was smart with a reasonable goal, and he was Hiccup's greatest challenge, especially as he caused the death of Hiccup's father. But the most interesting thing about this Golden Era was the incredible villains that showed up in between How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda. During this time, Dreamworks was basically on a roll. We got Rumpelstiltskin in Shrek Forever After, who had his moments. Then there was Titan from Megamind, who surprised us on so many levels. A subversion of the nice guy trope, he starts off as a lonely cameraman who gets superpowers, but instead of being a hero, he becomes a petty, selfish monster. He's scary because he has all the power of a god, but the maturity of a toddler. This is a very realistic and creepy look at what happens when an immoral person gets too much power. That said, we can't really forget Captain Chantal Dubois from Madagascar 3. She was like a Terminator in a human body because of how relentless she was in her pursuit. She could sniff out animals like a bloodhound and run through walls. She was pure sadistic fun, a villain who was terrifying but also hilarious. However, this era wouldn't be complete without Pitch Black from Rise of the Guardians. Pitch was the boogeyman, the personification of nightmares, and a dark mirror to the hero Jack Frost. Like Jack, Pitch felt ignored and invisible, but he used that loneliness to try to plunge the world into a permanent nightmare. You see, this golden era worked because Dreamworks finally understood how to balance a villain's power with their personality. They made characters that we loved to hate, or sometimes characters we actually loved. They give us villains with brains, hearts, and terrifying goals. Even with the occasional mistake, like Makunga, the era was defined by a massive leap in quality. They challenged the heroes emotionally and physically, making the victories feel earned. But as all good things do, this era eventually started to lose momentum. The studio began to change its focus again, and we started seeing the first signs of a decline that hasn't stopped till today. In 2013, Dreamworks gave us a movie called Turbo, which featured a villain named Guy Gagné. If you don't remember him, don't feel bad, because almost nobody does. He was a knockoff who didn't have any of the heart or the scary weight that someone like Tai Lung had. But after 2014, the studio really started to lose its touch for real, as the villains stopped being these deep, complicated people we love to see. One of the first big letdowns was Captain Smek from the movie Home. Instead of being a real threat that made you worry for the heroes, he was just a silly, uninteresting comedic character. You can't really be afraid of a villain if you're laughing at how goofy he is the whole time. Then came Dr. Zara in Abominable, and she is a perfect example of why the new villains were failing. She's often called one of the most pointless twist villains ever, but even worse, she wasn't exactly a threat to the heroes one bit. However, this flop era will not be complete without the chameleon from Kung Fu Panda 4. This was such a huge heartbreak for everyone because the earlier villains in that series were so perfect, whereas the chameleon is the weakest one because her reason for being bad only takes about 5 seconds to explain, and it doesn't even make sense. She says she became a villain because she was too small to learn Kung Fu. But wait a minute, Master Mantis is a tiny bug, and Master Viper doesn't even have arms or legs, yet they are legendary heroes. So yeah, she would have to do better than that. Nevertheless, another issue is the fact that she doesn't have any personal connection to Po. She just feels like a generic power stealer without a soul. Unfortunately for Dreamworks, the problems kept growing with characters like Professor Marmalade from The Bad Guys. He was another twist villain, but he was so obvious that most people guessed he was the bad guy way before the reveal happened. He follows a boring formula where he acts kind and then shows he is the mastermind. Compared to the main characters who are bad because society judged them, Marmalade is just a selfish person who doesn't have any depth. He's supposed to be a genius, but his plan involves brainwashing guinea pigs with a meteorite, which is more silly than scary. The studio tried again with Chelsea Van Der Zee, who was actually Queen Nerissa in Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. However, this was another disappointment because the movie's trailers actually spoiled the secret before the film even came out. We already knew she was a mermaid. But perhaps more terrible was the fact that her nice girl act at the high school was so over the top that it felt fake and manipulative from the start. She had a major identity crisis. One minute, she tried to be a scary queen, and the next, she was a vain, goofy teenager obsessed with her social media likes and her hair. Her plan was also a bit lazy. She spent all that time pretending to be a high schooler just to get Ruby to grab a trident for her.
Surprised? I'm a flippin' mermaid!
It felt like a lot of work for a very small plan. At the end, she just started begging and crying about her hair. It's hard to respect a so-called queen who acts like a toddler. Things got even weirder with Megamind versus the Doom Syndicate. Most fans don't even count this movie as real because the animation looks like an old video game from 30 years ago. There's really no need to even waste precious breath on this because everything about the movie was terrible. When you look at all these villains together, you can see exactly why the Golden Era died. The studio started giving us twists and poorly developed villains. In the Golden Age, Tai Lung and Lord Shen made us feel something deep, but these new villains were just standard kid movie bad guys. They were selfish, vain, and easily defeated. They didn't represent a big idea or a scary truth about the world. They were certainly not memorable, and the stakes they commanded weren't as high. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something incredible happened. When Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was released in 2022, it felt like someone at DreamWorks had finally said, you know what, screw it, let's give them something they will never forget. But instead of giving us one strong villain, they give us 3 at once, each one hitting in a completely different way. Imagine a toddler who never grew up. But instead of a rattle, he has a bottomless bag of deadly magical toys and wants to hog every drop of magic in the world. That's Jack Horner. He's got pink hair, a purple suit, and a thumb stained maroon from poking into too many pies. Jack is hilarious because he's so honest about being a monster. When a little ethical bug tries to tell him he's an irredeemable villain, Jack just laughs and calls him an idiot for taking so long to figure it out.
What took you so long, idiot?
But then the movie pulls at your heartstrings with Goldilocks. She leads a tough gang of bears, Mama, Papa, and Baby, and they're actually really sweet to each other even when they're committing crimes. Goldie's big problem is that she's a perfectionist who wants everything to be just right, and she thinks the only way to be happy is to find her biological human parents. She's a fierce fighter with a cool wooden staff, but her real struggle is inside her head. By the end, she realizes that the bears who raised her are her real family, and she chooses to save her brother Baby Bear instead of making her magic wish.
Like I told you, baby, you're the smash. I'm the crab.
It's a beautiful moment that shows a villain can actually change and find a happy ending, especially when their arc has always suggested redemption. But the most incredible villain in this movie, and actually in all of DreamWorks history, is Death himself. He appears as a big silvery wolf with glowing red eyes, and a terrifying whistle that makes your hair stand up. He is a force of nature coming for Puss because Puss was arrogant and wasted his first 8 lives like they were nothing. Every time he shows up, the whole movie feels colder and more serious. But what makes him so special is that you can't really beat him because he's inevitable and unkillable. The only way to defeat him is by earning his respect. So when Puss finally stops running and decides to fight for his very last life, Death sees that the arrogant legend is gone and a brave hero has taken his place. So he decides to let Puss go for now, because Puss finally learned his lesson. By putting these 3 characters in one movie, DreamWorks showed us that they still have that old spark of the golden era. They gave us a funny, evil man, a girl looking for a home, and a terrifying wolf that represents our biggest fears. It was a brief moment where everything felt just right again, proving that when they stop following boring trends, they can still make villains that stay with us forever. While DreamWorks can still spark that old magic, the days of consistently legendary villains have mostly faded into something rare. It feels like we've traded those heavy high stakes for something a bit more hollow and flashy. To see exactly why today's antagonists have lost their edge, check out our video on the lost realism of villains.